Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So hope everyone is doing okay today. Let me check my volume, always check your sound. Just prudent measures. I had an interesting day. I did a radio show called Fault Lines. It's actually on YouTube, but it was also on the actual radio. I don't know the channel off the top of my head, but awesome. I had an amazing time. Shout out to Fault Lines. They were awesome. They were extraordinarily nice to me. And we got into a debate. One guy's further to the right. Another guy's further to the left. In fact, the gentleman that's further to the left, Glenn, him and I vibed extraordinarily well. And we were having, but all of us were essentially having a kind of go at the topics that came up. It was awesome. It was so much fun. it's different. You can't curse, so because you're on a radio station. But so what? I mean, cursing not everything. I curse just for effect. I don't necessarily need to. And it's like this thing of when I do a live show, there's like I guess there's always this feeling of risk associated with it. You don't have to pass out, hit your head on a table. Yeah, that'll get a lot of views, but it's not necessarily the thing that you want to be viewed for. So there's always this feeling of threat, this feeling of anything can go wrong, something can go wrong, and that you're flying not necessarily by the seat of your pants, but at the very least, it's live. You have a bunch of eyes on you doing something, and it would either be good, bad, somewhere in between. Like I said, you can throw up on camera, you can hit your head, you can fall out, you can have a heart attack, all sorts of stuff that can happen. You can just get it wrong. You can fuck up. So there's that element of risk. So, but that it gets up the ante, at least for me, when you're in a debate on something like that. You're on a radio station, and these guys are typical. They're more versed in dealing with this kind of debates for political stuff. They've been on mainstream media networks like Fox or MSM or something like that, and so they're more accustomed to this. And it's like you're in the lion's den right off the bat. But I think I held my own well. And it was a lot of fun. So, Fault Lines, check it out. It was an awesome, awesome show. I loved it. The thing I want to talk about today is something that's taking place now. There are bombings taking place on the port of Hodeidah in Yemen. I have a very basic and straightforward question that I'm going to try to keep this relatively short because I want it to be understood by whoever's listening. Is this really what we want our military doing? And do we really want this to be what we do? And I'm talking about us as a country. I understand that there are some people who believe that joining the military is a good thing, and they're socializing culture and they're believing that this is a good thing. They're serving their country and all this other stuff. And you have people all across the world being taught the same thing. And those people essentially shed their humanity and go into wanton murder whenever their country or a few politicians tell them to do so. In our case, I'm asking somewhat of a more fundamental question. Even going with this idea that you may have to have a military, fair enough. Is this what we want that military doing? Did you know that before we took down Iraq, there was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq? Like, Saddam Hussein is a dictator. Dictators are not necessarily all that fond of having unstable elements that are trying to take down their government. There were no terrorists in Iraq before the United States got there. And then all of a sudden, all over the place. What do you know? The moment that you apply heat, pressure, a little death, murder, some torture, out pops these kind of terroristic elements that are pushing back against your slaughter. This morphs into this degree of ISIS that kind of spreads throughout the continent. Now, Donald Trump has blamed Obama for ISIS. You can't blame Obama for ISIS. George Bush is the one that smashed Iraq into 1,000 bits. What you can blame Obama for is rank incompetence with giving ISIS a ton of weaponry, whether either incompetence or intentional weaponry that was used essentially to take down the Syrian government, or essentially to try. Here's the thing. We are doing very odd and weird things that the media is not saying anything about and is not talking about honestly. Just to make my point. Right here. Saudi Arabia. United States and Saudi Arabia's arms significantly enhance ISIS military capabilities, report reveals. What the report basically said was there was no way they can get this many weapons just off the battlefield alone. There's only so many dead bodies you can take weapons from. Well, come to find out, they weren't. How ISIS got weapons from the United States and used them to take Iraq and Syria. It gets worse. Right here. I gave the United States trucks and ammunition to Al-Qaeda, the chaotic U.S. effort to arm Syrian rebels. The United States was in such a rush and a hurry to arm Syrian rebels that the weapons that they were given to the quote-unquote moderates, ended up in the hands of terrorists. Now, the trick here is the terminology that's being used to describe the situation. Moderates is just a government talking point that the media swallowed as if they can make a distinction between who they're giving those things to, essentially the rapists, the terrorists, the bloodthirsty terrorists who are trying to take down the government, versus the people who they're considering to be moderates. But the fact is, it was ISIS that was getting their hands on those weapons. It was actually straight up terrorists that was getting their hands on those weapons, and that was trying to take down the Syrian government. And we are now, at this moment, protecting those terrorists. They've gone to U.S. areas, hiding in U.S. areas, because Bashar al-Assad and Russia has, for the most part, cleared out and liberated Syria. Here's the other part. Like I said before, and I'm bouncing back. I know I'm bouncing, but my point here is we are aiding terrorists to take down a sovereign government in Syria. Syria, Bashar al-Assad, whatever you want to think of him, he is the leader of that particular country. And what I will guarantee you is the people who are living under the terrorists welcome Bashar al-Assad being in that office. It's not that they love him. It's just they don't want to live under bloodthirsty rapists, terrorists, and head chopper offers. Listen to some of the testimonies of the people who in those liberated areas. And you come back and explain to me how the terrorists that we've been supporting are the good guys. And if these guys are terrorists, like I'm making a point to saying they are terrorists, because they are. They're trying to take down the government itself. And we've lost control over where those arms and where those weapons have gone. Then what side are we standing on? And is this really what you want your military doing? On the first point, we're in that country illegally. That's the first point. Meaning, the government of that country has not welcomed us into that country. We've invaded that country, and we are currently occupying that country against the wishes of that government. Iran and Russia have been invited. We have not. And not just have not been invited, we are breaking international law being there. And there's this. To make the point, Bashar al-Assad warns U.S. troops to leave Syria as he raises the prospects of a clash. The reason he's saying this is, you're in our territory. You've literally invaded our country, and you're telling us. The United States sent a letter to Iran telling Iran that they need to leave Syria. Think about that. That's nonsense. Syria, a sovereign nation, invited Iran and Russia into their country, their system, and propping up their government in order to beat back the terrorists. That's what took place. Who invited the United States? Nobody. We are there illegally. Over 90% of that territory has been liberated. The part that hasn't been is the part that the United States has essentially taken, stolen, occupied, in which case they're protecting the terrorists that are there. Look, it's not about loving Bashar al-Assad. It's about whether you want your U.S. military committed to regime change and whether you want it in those countries behaving in those ways, supporting terrorist organizations. The second part, to go back to the original, Yemen. We are literally, this report came out, in the same way that we're assisting terrorists in Syria, we are now also assisting Al-Qaeda in Yemen. Think about that shit. Supposedly, we're on a war. We're at war on terror, whatever that means. And being at war on terror, you have these, the cacophony of groups that the United States have rolled out, saying that these guys are threats and these guys are coming after us and everything else. Okay, fair enough. But it seems like we have certain geopolitical interests that we're using this particular cudgel to enact. So we don't like Bashar al-Assad, so all of a sudden we need to go into that particular country and assist those terrorists and take it down a shot, even to the point of strikes when you couldn't necessarily validate a chemical weapons release. And in Yemen, we are murdering and assisting the Saudi government, a theocratic government that chops off heads, chops off hands, based on what Hillary Clinton said, spreads terrorism all throughout the region of the world. Many of the people who were on those planes were Saudis, and yet we are arm in arm, thick as thieves, assisting in the bombing and the killing and the massacring of one of the poorest nations in that region of the world. We are bombing a port city. They are facing starvation to the tune of millions of people. There is already a cholera epidemic that is, if I'm not mistaken, the worst on the planet. And we are arm in arm, thick as thieves. Our thick neck, square chin, brave soldiers assisting in the murder and the slaughter of children and women as they huddle in their ports, terrified of what the United States and Saudi Arabia is going to do. In addition to paying death squads of Al-Qaeda to essentially fight the government that we don't particularly like. Is this what we want our military to be doing? Is it legal? That's the first point. Is Yemen attacking us? No, they're not. Is Syria attacking us? No, they're not. We are not under threat by either of these countries. Has anybody declared war on those countries? No, we have not. We have not declared war on Yemen, nor have we declared war on Syria. Both of these engagements are utterly illegal, and yet nobody says anything about it. In fact, they talk about it in opposite terms in this kind of Orwellian way, as if the legalities of this don't matter at all. Maybe because the legalities of this don't matter at all. To give you my point, when Donald Trump fires off an illegal missile strike, nobody asks the question, is this legal? If anything, they attack Donald Trump from dusk to dawn. The last word they say on their mouth is fuck Trump, and the first words they say is probably something of the same. And yet, on the day that he fired an illegal missile strike for a chemical strike, where Mattis himself says that he has no evidence that the Syrian government did, meaning they've struck somebody with weapons when they can't even identify a crime that has taken place or the culprit, they worship them. They worship them. I mean, you had people doing poetry. I'm blinded by the light of our missiles. Oh, I get so turned on when the president fires off an illegal missile strikes and murders a brown person. It's fucking insane. Nobody asks the questions of, is it legal? How is the president firing off a missile strike when nobody's under threat? Can they even prove that they did it? None of this stuff gets asked. None of it. The media pushes forth this idea that we are doing good in the world, and I'm trying to break that model of, look who our bedfellows are. Head choppers in Saudi Arabia, to which we are thick as thieves as. Again, despite many of those people on the planes, and despite what they're doing now from the standpoint of murdering civilians, the wanton murder of civilians, women, children, babies, us assisting them in that wanton murder of civilians. I'm asking, is this what we really want our military doing? And the Orwellian way in which the media talks about this helps propagates this thing that allows them to kill and murder in these ways. Just for a quick point, because I don't want this video to go too long, and it's going a little bit longer than what. Democracy dies in the darkness. The Washington Post. As ISIS retreats in Syria, the United States and Iran scramble for control. Okay, all right. Explain it. The United States and Iran backed forces are locked in a race to take Islamic State strongholds in southeast Syria and seize a stretch of land that will either cement Tehran's regional ambitions or stifle them. Well, wait a minute. What are you talking about? How is the United States in a land grab in a country that it doesn't own? How is that happening? How on earth is the United States taking land in a country that it doesn't own? And between the United States being there and Tehran being there, Tehran was invited. We weren't. I guess my point is this is a weird way of phrasing this, and yet this is the perspective that they phrase these things. Let's keep going. The scramble for pole position in Deir ez-Zor province is likely to be one of the most consequential fights against the extremist group in Syria, posing a regional test for President Trump as his administration turns up the rhetoric against Iran. On Wednesday, Islamic State asserted responsibility for twin attacks into Iran that left dozens dead, a clear reminder of the group's reach as it faces against Iranian and U.S. forces as proxy support for Syria and Iraq. If confirmed, they will be the group's first major strike in Iran. So understand Iran is a direct threat, and they are fighting the terrorists. They're fighting the actual terrorists. The United States-backed forces launched an offensive this week to push the Islamic State out of self-proclaimed Raqqa, but there are signs that the battle that follows in the eastern province will be tougher, and the group's long-term survival of the force holding significant territory. U.S.-backed forces is essentially a terrorist group that is trying to take down the rightful government of that country. You know, one of the things that bothered me, there's a magnificent hypocrisy on the left. A profound hypocrisy. My heart bleeds for these kids that Donald Trump are ripping away at the border. It really does. It is a nasty, disgusting thing, and he has to be a horrible, disgusting person in order to use these kids and these parents as a political game in order to get Democrats to vote on his immigration policy. He believes that Democrats care about immigrants and the poor. I hate to tell him they don't. In the same way they let DACA fail, you're not going to get what you want on this, and those kids are going to be at the border and they're going to slay you politically because nobody wants to see a kid screaming at the top of his lungs as he's ripped away from his mama with the label Trump. But that being said, besides the point, the Obama administration was giving weapons to terrorists. I'm so goddamn smart. I'm Obama. I'm a constitutional lawyer. I can play chess and I can manage all of these forces. So I can move a pawn here and I can push a knight here and the world can be great and I can manage this stuff. And then Libya happens. And in no way does it change his mendacity when he goes for this thing of Syria. Do you understand that the war that is taking place in Syria, there may have been an element of Syria that started off, when it first started off, as being an uprising based on what was taking place in Syria. But let's be honest, that has been magnificently hijacked from the standpoint of the United States, the UK, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, dumping money into trying to get regime change. It's just so happened, I guess they didn't intend on Russia and Iran joining into the fray in order to push their plans back. My point in this is, this war has bubbled on to the point of hundreds of thousands of lives. How long would this war have gone if the United States and Saudi Arabia didn't invest their forces and invest their resources into giving ISIS a bunch of weapons? I'm making a point that, yes, your heart bleeds for the kids, but also your heart should bleed for what is taking place from the standpoint of Syria and the previous president's role in allowing that to take place. It doesn't give this president a bed of roses in the least, because Donald Trump has persisted in this particular policy, doing airstrikes when he didn't even know if somebody was a culprit in that situation. Not to mention the number of people he's drone bombing and killing in mass outweighs Obama's many times over. I'm just going to make this point that I wish there was just an equivalency here. That's all. I wish it was, yes, I condemn the last president because, yes, he allowed that war to prosper and allowed that war to go on based upon the help and resources that he was given to that particular area. That doesn't mean I like Trump. Both can be true. Let's keep going back to this real quick, and I'll make this fast. Experts say the Islamic State has moved senior leaders to Zayza Zor, along with the growing number of foot soldiers, as it loses control of Mosul, the group's capital, in Iraq, and the National Black Forces in Raqqa. Let's see. Victory for Iran-backed force would give Tehran large controlled swaths of Syrian and Iraqi borders, securing land route through Iraq and access to Syria and its proxy Hezbollah in Lebanon. For the United States, control of Deir Zor brings a bargaining chip for future demonstrations. How on earth is the United States securing anything in somebody else's country and using land that it's stolen in somebody else's country as a bargaining chip? I don't understand how the newspaper reads this with a straight face and act as if fairness has anything to do with this. The perspective of this is so jaded, and yet people read this and they look at this and say, yeah, that makes perfect sense. It is perfectly okay for us to steal territory in somebody else's country. If Mexico tried to take Florida, what do you think the response of the United States would be? This paper, along with other media, gives a certain perspective of the world that is jaded and is so biased from the standpoint of the way it looks at the world, while at the same token saying, we're objective. That's something else. That is something else. All right, I'm not going to keep this one. Let's see who's here. Peter version 1, democracy dies under darkness. You sounded like CE. Who's CE? Democracy dies under darkness. No, it's supposed to be darkness. Democracy dies in the dark or something like that. Yeah, I'm not going to keep this one long because I don't want this video to go long, and it's already gone 22 minutes. So, let's see. Tabitha Enriquez, hi Luca. What's happening, Luca? Tell Claire's money, Jamal. Money. Yes, unfortunately, money has a lot to do with it, but it's also, honestly, a lot of this also has, like I said, mendacity. This belief that we are somehow fundamentally better and we are somehow fundamentally exceptional. Newsflash, we're not. We're just human beings. And because we're exceptional, we can do shit that other countries can't necessarily pull off. That's nonsense. That's utter propaganda. And people have swallowed that shit hook, line, and sinker. You are just a human being. That's it. You, as an American, is just an American. You're just a person. You're not exceptional. You're not better than anybody else. Not anything. You got a magnificent advantage at the end of the war because Europe had been decimated. So it made you feel as if there was something unique and something special. I'm sorry, there wasn't. There wasn't. You're just a person. It is as though we are a nation so poor and undereducated that children look forward to being Stockholmed, further sacrificing their lives to private contractors by enlisting. Well, here's the thing. Part of it is you're told God and country. There's a movie, All Quiet on the Western Front. That movie, it's written by a book. It's a German guy, and it's told from the German perspective of the people in the war. It's mind-blowing, the propaganda that's used and the similarities with the propaganda that's used in the United States. This idea of exceptionalism, Germany, about the same thing. You know, this idea that you need to go off to war and you'll be a man, Germany, thought the same thing. This is World War I, by the way. There's a similarity in the propaganda that is fed in order to get people to behave a particular way. Now, that being said, can you fully blame the person if they grow up from, pillar to post, believing in this thing of it is right, morally right, for me to join the military. It is right from the standpoint of country. I am doing a service to my country, etc., etc. You get all this stuff. Are there other ways to do a service to your country? Do you have to kill? Do you have to be murdered? Are there other ways to service your country as opposed to hitting somebody over the head? especially when you look at the reasons why you're hitting somebody over the head. Are they good reasons? One of the things that All Quiet in the Western Front, they didn't really talk about the war, if that makes sense. Like, they didn't talk about the reasons for the war. They would talk about the war itself. They would talk about how shitty it was and everything else. But the reasons for the war oftentimes wasn't discussed, because ultimately the reasons for the war was less important than just the monotony of what was taking place. Kill this person, barely missed, death on this side, this guy dies, that guy dies, I got injured in this particular thing. And you just end up with this cast of people living through a war. That's the movie. Now, at one point, they started to complain about it from the standpoint of, why are we fighting this war and what's the point in this and everything else. But most of the film, it's just business. What's amazing about that is when you talk to people who are in the military and they get out the military, they say you don't question that stuff until you're out. Smedley Butler, same thing. He would say the same thing. You don't question it until you're out. Once you're out, you start thinking about what you did. Howard Zinn, same thing. You don't question it until you get out. You're propagandized in such a way where you are turned into almost like a robot. So when you kill somebody, I'm just doing my service. I'm just doing my country service. You just kill somebody. I mean, shit, man. Meant you sounded like Cenk Uygur. Oh, I did not. Peter version 1. Jamal has a synthetic kidney that can process 12 ounces of alcohol in an hour. I wish, Luca. I wish. I would love a fucking synthetic kidney. America cherry picks its outrage. It cherry picks its outrage based on who it wants to attack. If you remember, the Tillerson memo was a memo that essentially said, look, we don't really care about human rights. Ultimately, we use human rights as a club to beat over the head people who we don't like. So China, Iran, Russia gets a club. Saudi Arabia, even though they're a theocratic regime that chop heads and in some cases crucify people, not so much. Not so much. Being a nonviolent person, peace warrior, takes far more courage than ever I have seen. Yes, but I don't think it's that simple, if that makes sense. Like I call myself a peacenik, but by the same token, I'm not into this mindset that there is no circumstance to which you don't draw your club. I mean, ultimately, look, at the point where Hitler took Poland, we're going to World War II. I mean, like there is such a thing as defense of something else, or defense of self. Meaning, if we were attacked, then yeah, at that point you ride out. But there's a certain Orwellian quality to the way we go about our affairs. I mean, like that article is talking about the United States stealing land from another country, and is not cutting into those terms of theft, stealing. It's using take land from Tehran, when Tehran was the one that was welcomed into the country. Like, this is lunacy, but this is how our media, be it CNN, MSNBC, all of them cut this narrative in a particular way. With CNN or MSNBC and Fox News cutting the narrative a particular way based on who the politician is, meaning they're just biased, they're hacks. CNN being more just corporate media, all of them to some degree are corporate media. I guess I'm trying to make just a fundamental point. Is this really what we want our military to be? Is this really what we want our people to leverage our bravery for? To essentially help a theocratic regime murder a bunch of poor people in this country. They've done nothing to us. They haven't attacked us. They haven't declared war on us. It's magnificently illegal. And yet, we're doing it anyway. This will be a humanitarian crisis that will put millions in jeopardy. And Saudi Arabia, with our help, has shown no propensity at all of stopping. They are just murdering civilians at this point. Kind of like what we were doing when we were in Iraq. Thumb in the eyes is a good way to get out of a situation. I don't think people that join know what they're getting into. Trudy. So two things. If you were born in Sparta, how would you behave? Like, I think about the question I'm asking. What would be your value system? if you were born in Sparta, ancient Sparta. Yes, every so often you would kick people into a bottomless pit in this kind of badass way with your muscles ripping. This is Sparta! That type of stuff. But as a mom, you would expect your kid to either go off, send that kid off to this kind of boot camp that kid is going to stay in for years, come in a little criminal soldier with an ideology that says you either go out on your shield, you come back with your shield, you die on it. Cowardice was not something that was going to be accepted. I guess I'm trying to make this point that the prevailing ideology of a particular culture expresses itself in particular ways. And in the same way they're expressing themselves from the standpoint of like Sparta or Greece or whatever else in the way they went about their affairs, we're doing the same. Think of our movies. We're a mentally violent culture. We try to act like we're civilized. No such thing. Look at it's a veneer of civilization with violence just in every crevice. Having to have an argument on whether or not you can carry guns in Starbucks is insanity. Why would you need to carry guns in Starbucks? Who are you trying to murder? Who are you trying to kill? And why are you so terrified? We are a violent culture. I love my John Wick. Love John Wick. John Wick kills 100 people in a movie because of a dog. I look at that and say, fair enough. They shouldn't have fucked with his dog. Now, I understand intellectually that makes me somewhat of a fucked up person. But again, I am a product of my culture in the same way that those civilizations were products of their culture. The person who's deciding to join up is joining up because they're products to some degree of their culture. And in their head, either they're trying to get out of a bad economic situation or they believe that what they're doing is somehow service to their country. It's not the Department of Defense. It's the Department of War. Yes, they don't necessarily know what they're getting into. When they get into it, they would have a better understanding of what that is. But at that point, it's too late. You're already in the shit. I don't know how you break that. Like, I don't know how you shake that. And it's one of those things you can't even be mad at people for it because this entire society, to some degree, advocates and pushes it. It pushes the behavior. So, I knew as a kid I didn't want to die in a violent way. Hello, jerk. Hello, jerk. I knew that too, but again, you say for the moment you're not in the military. Say you're Martin Luther King. And say as Martin Luther King, you're walking down the bridge in Selma. And as you get closer to the bridge, all of you guys are in your suits. Having signs, I am a man. And you look and you see those cops. And you know what is about to take place. They're about to beat the living shit out of you. You're about to take a beating. Now, you don't turn and walk the other way. You know that they could kill you on that bridge. But you go anyway. It's not that you necessarily wanted to die a violent death. There were things that just mattered more to you. I guess that's what I'm saying. In the same way, you've convinced human beings that dying for their country, which is not even their country, it's just whoever's running the government at that point, like a few people, dying for those people is somehow a good and positive thing. I don't necessarily see how that's true. You're not really dying for the country per se. The country often, in many of these cases, is not the thing that's under threat. Syria is not attacking us. The United States is used as authorization of military force as a fig leaf, talking about they're fighting terrorism, creating terrorism, as they go about the world setting fires in one country after the next. They're using this to reorganize the Middle East into the way they want to reorganize the Middle East and pilfer resources. That article, there's a truth in that article that runs through it even though the truth is not being said. We are stealing somebody else's land and laying claim to it. Bashar al-Assad saying the United States needs to get out of Dodge. He's saying that because we've stolen their land. Think of the ridiculousness if Russia backed the South in the Civil War. And in backing the South in the Civil War, the Russia says, this is the Free Army of the United States of America. This rebel group is fighting for freedom. They're fighting for freedom of choice. Well, yeah, choice to have slaves, but nevertheless, the propaganda is they're fighting for freedom under oppressive Abraham Lincoln that bastard. And as the North beats them back, say for the moment they take Florida. And Russia has its military in Florida. And Russia essentially says, if you come into Florida, we will attack you. And the United States says, you're in our country, get the fuck out. And they say, this is the free army of the United States. And we are supporting the free army of the United States. Think of the ridiculousness of that. That would be utterly insane. And yet, that is essentially what has taken place in Syria. The media doesn't report it that way. And I suspect that's part of the reason people have lost faith in media. Not because of this one particular instance, but because of several instances where their reality is not lining up to what they're seeing on the television. And with multiple news sources, they can see that there is a disparity between what they're seeing with their eyes, what they're hearing in other media, versus what they're being told. And I suspect that disparity is becoming louder and louder based on garbage like this. Syriana analysis claims ISIS is between the United States and Syrian forces. They attack Syria. They don't attack the United States. Do the math. Oh, I am doing the math. I say they're terrorists. The United States is harboring terrorists. That's my point in this article. In Yemen, Al-Qaeda is literally saying they're working with the United States, States-backed groups, in order as kill squads to go after the Houthis. And in Syria, ISIS was essentially getting weapons, and the United States wasn't all that picky about the way those weapons were being handed out. And those weapons were essentially used to enhance ISIS capabilities. Whether it enhanced those capabilities through idiocy, meaning it was incompetence in the way the program was ran, or whether it was given to them intentionally as a way to try to, again, attack the Syrian government, I don't care. I don't even know which one is worse. What I would say is we have been assisting terrorists to take down the government of that country. That's what it boils down to. The media doesn't say that. The media is not telling the truth about what's taking place. And just like they're not completely saying that the United States has been helping Saudi Arabia murder Yemenis, or however it's pronounced, they're being somewhat dishonest. All right, I'm going to end this because this one has gone way, way, way too long. I have a few more that I want to do. Kind of stemming from a conversation that I had when we were at it was after the interview, where we're just talking, we're just shooting shit, and I want to talk about a conversation that came up during that. So I'm going to end this, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, everyone. And let me make sure I got everyone. Yes. All right. I'll be back shortly. Thanks, guys.